Good morning and welcome to Money as You Grow on the Bookshelf. Today we will be reading this story called The Raincoat, and your supplies you need if you want to join me with activities is just a pen and some paper. So it's pretty simple today. We'll get started in just a moment. Hi, my name is Samantha Roth, the Scott and Carver Financial Capability Educator with the University of Minnesota Extension. And thank you for joining me for Money as You Grow Bookshelf. Today we will be reading The Raincoat by Lauren Mills. So if you haven't heard of the story before, the basics is after Mina's father dies, her neighbors make her a coat so she can go to school in cold weather. Mina chews the scraps of fabric for her coat because of the special stories behind each scrap. She is surprised by the reaction of her new classmates to the coat. So as we're reading, a few key ideas to look for and how to discuss real life examples with your children. So the first one is solving problems. And when problems come up, we try to deal with them. Solving problems means finding what works best for us and taking action to make things better. Kids can show this by describing problems and come up with a few ideas to make things better. The second key idea is sharing and borrowing. There are two kinds of sharing: something shared that does not have to be returned or paid for as a gift. Something borrowed or lent must be returned. Kids can show this by explaining the difference between lending and giving something away. The third key idea is staying true to yourself. And sometimes we might feel left out if we don't have what other people have. Knowing what's important to you and not comparing yourself to others can help you feel good about your decisions. Kids can show this by naming one special thing they like about themselves and one thing that makes each family member special too. If they are 7 or older, they can also discuss why it's okay that different people use their money for different things. So let me switch my videos so that you can see the book, and then we will start reading. So The Raincoat by Lauren Mills. And this was published by Little Brown and Company. In winter, Papa carried me to church in a burlap feed sack because I didn't have a coat. Mama, Papa, Clemmy, and me, we'd all hitch a ride on Jeremy Miller's hay wagon and huddle under Mama's big quilt. I know Papa loved that quilt because he said it had all the nice, bright colors of the day in it. And the day was something he hardly ever saw. He worked down in the black coal mines and didn't come up till the sun was gone. I told Papa it was warmer under that quilt than if I had a coat. He always laughed when I said that and told me, Nina, you got the right way of thinking. People only need people and nothing else. Don't you forget that. Papa got sick with a miner's cough and couldn't work much. So Mama stitched day and night on her quilts to try to make some Money. When I was old enough to start school, I couldn't go. They needed me at home to help Mama. I would card all her quilt stuffing and keep Clemmie's dirty fingers out of all that cotton. I made a doll for myself by stitching up some of Mama's quilt scraps and stuffing cotton inside. I talked to her like she was my friend because I didn't have any. Mama was too busy for much talk, and when Papa was home, he mostly stared out the window. What the heck? It's not switched. Sorry, everybody. I just realized you're not seeing the book, so I'm going to try to fix that. And let's see if it switches. It's not working this time. Why would that be? That's irritating. All right, since that's not working, we are going to switch to a good old fashioned one camera. So it's been a while. We'll see how well I do at this. Now I gotta find myself. There we go. All right, we're back. Maybe. Who knew this is so hard? How about I go this way? All right, so here is the picture. So we're gonna start over so we can see the book this time. In winter, Papa carried me to church in a burlap feed sack because I didn't have a coat. Mama, Papa, Clemmy, and me, we'd all hitch a ride on Jeremy Miller's hay wagon and huddle under Mama's big quilt. I know Papa loved that quilt because he said it had all the nice bright colors of the day in it. And the day was something he hardly ever saw. He worked down in the black coal mines and didn't come up till the sun was gone. I told Papa it was warmer under the quilt than if I had a coat. He always laughed when I said that and told me, Mina, you got the right way of thinking. People only need people and nothing else. Don't you forget that. So we can see them in the wagon going on their way to church. Papa got sick with a miner's cough and couldn't work much. So Mama stitched day and night on her quilts to try to make some money. When I was old enough to start school, I couldn't go. They needed me at home to help Mama. I would card all her quilt stuffing and keep Clemmie's dirty fingers out of all that cotton. I made a doll for myself by stitching up some of Mama's quilt scraps and stuffing cotton inside. I talked to her like she was my friend because I didn't have any. Mama was too busy for much talk, and when Papa was home, he mostly stared out the window. So we can see Papa staring out the window and Mina and Clemmie carding wool. You see that? The summer I was 8, Papa called me over to his rocking chair. I climbed up on his lap and he said, "You're getting big, Mina." "Too big for laps?" I asked. "Not too big for mine," he said softly, "but too big to still be at home. It's nearing time you went to school." I could hardly back my smiling just thinking about all the friends I would have, but I didn't want to leave Mama without a helper. "Papa," I said, "I can't go to school. Mama needs me at home." Papa just looked at me real steady and said, "They have books at school, Mina. You can learn things from those books that you can't learn at home." "But I don't have a coat, Papa," I quietly reminded him. "Mina," he said, "don't you worry about a coat. I'll think of something." But he never got the chance. Papa died that summer. Everyone came at once and brought us food. I couldn't figure out how so many people could squeeze into our little cabin, but somehow they managed it. They all said they knew my Papa well. I sat on a stool back by the wood stove with Clemmie on my lap so no one would step on us. I couldn't stand it. They all wore black, black like the coal mines that killed my Papa. He didn't even like black. He liked all the bright colors of the day. So why were they wearing black, I wondered. We can see Mina and Clemmie hiding back by the coal stove as they have everybody who comes to give their condolences. School started in September. Mama said I could go, but I decided not to. I still didn't have a coat to wear, and I knew it was no use starting something I'd have to quit when the weather turned cold. Other mothers who had children in school came over to quilt with Mama. I called them the quilting mothers. That fall, they were all working on a pattern called Joseph's Coat of Many Colors. I looked at it and said, "That Joseph sure was lucky to have such a coat. I wish I had one like that." "Why do you say that, Nita?" Mrs. Miller asked me. "Because then I could go to school," I said, a little embarrassed that I had mentioned it. "Well, now, Nina," said Mrs. Miller, "I don't know that any of us has a spare coat we could hand down to you, but I'm sure we have some scraps to spare. We could piece them together and you'd have a coat like Joseph's after all." Mrs. Miller looked around the room and the other mothers nodded. Mama quickly protested. "You all need those rags for your own quilts. Don't go giving us things that you need yourselves." They paid no attention to Mama. Mrs. Hunter said, "And we could use feed bags for the inside of the coat." My eyes filled with tears, but I wasn't embarrassed anymore. I said, "I have a feed sack that Papa used to carry me in." I ran and fetched it. "Will this do?" "Yes, it would do just fine," they told me. Then I thought of something important. "But you need to make quilts to sell. You can't take the time out to quilt a coat." "First things first," said Mrs. Miller, and they all repeated it. Mama smiled and shook her head, and I saw tears in her eyes too. So if we look close, we can see the quilting mothers going through scraps here at the bottom, and then they're also measuring Mina to figure out what size of a quilt they would like. The very next day, I went to school, running most of the way to keep warm and thinking all the while of the coat I soon would have. The schoolhouse was just one room filled with 14 children. I had seen most of them at church, but never got the chance to talk to them much. I knew I would love school. Even though I was put in the front row with the youngest ones, and Clyde Bradshaw whispered that it was because I was dumb. Then Shane Hunter pulled my braid, and Suki Miller said I asked the teacher too many questions. But our teacher, Miss Campbell, smiled at me and said, "Smart people are those who have asked a lot of questions." My most favorite thing about school was sharing day. Each of us had our own day when we shared something special with the class. Clyde Bradshaw brought in the watch his grandpa gave him. It still ticked, and he made sure we all heard it. On her day, Lottie showed us the porcelain doll her aunt from New York had sent her. We all thought it was the most beautiful thing ever and wanted to touch it, but Lottie wouldn't let anyone near it. She said, "Nope, it's mine," which made everybody mad. I knew just what I would show when it was my sharing day, but I kept it a secret. And I knew the quilting mothers would keep it a secret too. Each day I hurried home to see my coat. It was looking like the colors of the fall days, the yellow golds of the birch leaves, the silvery grays and purples of the sky, the deep greens and browns of the pines, and the rusty reds of the chimney bricks. All of the colors Papa would have chosen. I decided to put a piece of his work jacket in there. It just seemed right. So here we see Mina sitting with Clemmy, taking her Papa's work jacket and taking a few pieces out of it to add to her coat. The mothers worked as quickly as they could, but the cold weather was quicker. At recess, Suki asked me why I didn't wear a coat. I told her I couldn't jump rope as well with one on. Jumping a lot kept me warm. I was fast becoming the best rope jumper in the school. Not last night, but the night before, 24 robbers came knocking at my door. That was my favorite rope tune. One night when Mama looked sad, I told her things could be worse. We could have 24 robbers knocking at our door. She said, "Now, what on earth would they want from us, Mina?" "Oh, Mama, they would want the coat first thing," I said. She laughed then, but I was most serious. Finally, my coat was done. It was so beautiful, and the quilting mothers had finished in time for my sharing day. That morning, I walked to school looking down at all the different colored pieces of cloth in my coat. All the stories the quilting mothers had told me about the rags and who they belonged to. I knew by heart I had ended up choosing the most worn pieces for my coat because the best stories went with them. I was still looking down and repeating each story to myself when I bumped into Clyde outside the schoolyard. "Hey, rag coat," he said, and all the others laughed. Before I knew it, Suki, Lottie, and Clyde were dancing around me singing, "Rag coat, rag coat." Lottie said, "Look, it's even dirty with soot." And she poked her finger into my Papa's cloth. And Suki said, "Hey, Mina, you were better off with no coat than that old ragged thing." "Maybe you're right," I yelled. "If I had no coat, then I never would have come to school." I broke through their circle and ran away from them far into the woods. What does Mina look like in this picture? How do you think that made her feel? I found an old log and sat on it for a long time, too angry to cry. I just stared across the fields Papa used to gaze at. "Oh, Papa, I wished you were here," I said. And then I couldn't help but cry. I cried for Papa. I cried for quilting mothers who had wasted their time. I was crying so hard, I rocked that old log. Then all at once, I stopped because I felt something warm and familiar. The feed bag inside my coat made me feel like Papa's arms were around me again. I could almost hear him say, "Mina, people only need people and nothing else. Don't you forget that." I jumped off the log, wiped the tears from my cheeks, and brushed the leaves off my coat. "I won't forget it, Papa," I said, and I headed back to school. When I walked into the schoolroom, Miss Campbell looked up, surprised. "Why, Mina, I was told you ran home sick." Suki jumped up, her face all red. "That's not true, Miss Campbell," she blurted out. "We lied to you. Mina left because we made fun of her old coat." "I'll tell her, Suki," I said. "It's not an old coat. It's a new coat." "But it's just a bunch of old rags," said Lottie. "It's not just a bunch of old rags," I said. "My coat is full of stories, stories about everybody here." They all looked at me, real puzzled. "Don't you see? These are all your rags." They still seemed puzzled, so I showed them. "Look, Shane, Here is that blanket of yours that your mama's sisters gave her the night you were born. The midwife said you wouldn't live but 3 days because you were so small. But your mama wrapped you up tight in that blanket and put you in a little box by the wood stove. And your papa kept the fire all night for 3 weeks. Of course you lived, all right, I said, looking up at Shane. Shane was big. And you hung on to that blanket for years until it was nothing but shreds. My blanket, he whispered. I thought I'd never see it again. He looked at his old rag like he wanted to touch it. Then the others began discovering their old favorite things and crowded around me. They each wanted their story told, and I remembered every one. I even showed the piece of the woolen jacket Suki had left her calf wear when I was sick. Lottie's rag was a faded piece from a fancy dress her aunt from New York had sent for her 7th birthday, and Clyde had a scrap from the pants that he always wore when he went fishing with his grandpa. Suki said, Mina, I sure am sorry we ever said anything bad about your coat. Me too, I heard the others murmur. I wouldn't blame you if you didn't let us touch it, Lottie said. I wouldn't blame you if you didn't want to be our friend at all, said Clyde. Friends share, I said, and I let them each touch their rag. Then I showed them the feed sack inside my coat and told them how it made me feel my papa's arms again. Shane put his hand on my shoulder and said, Mina, I bet you got the warmest coat in school. Well, it took a whole lot of people to make it warm, I told them, and we all laughed. So here we see Mina surrounded by her classmates and telling the stories about all the different pieces of fabric that make up her quilt. And that is the end. So that was The Rag Coat by Lauren Mills. So a few things to think about is that friends and neighbors work together to help each other out in this story. How did Mina's family help? How did they help Mina's family after her father died? Is there a time when someone helped you? What things have you done to help a friend or family member? The women know how to sew and they make quilts to earn money for their needs. They also share their fabric and like to work together. What skills do you have? The story is set in the past. How did Mina get to school? Did you notice that she had a walk? What do you notice about her school and classroom? Children at school have a sharing time. What kind of things did the other kids bring to school? What would you bring to school for sharing time? Mina finally gets her winter coat and wears it to school. What do her classmates think about her coat? How does Mina feel at first? Mina's father tells her all people need is each other. How did that help Mina when she wore her coat at school? So think about, at the end of the story, Mina tells her friends share. What's something that you have shared with your friends? Mina also told her classmates about her coat and all the stories the mother shared about each scrap of fabric. Do you have a special story behind something that you have? Then lastly, let's think about needs and wants in the stories. After we looked at the pictures and heard the story, what needs are the same back then as they are now? What needs are different? What do you need to go to school? So if you are 5 and older, we can talk about sharing with others. So like Mina's family, there may be families in your school or neighborhood who have a need. So visit with your children about what needs families might have and how they might be able to help them. What does your family love to do that could help somebody else? Maybe your family likes to garden, they like to cook, they could babysit, shovel snow, or help collect cans. So make a list of talents as a family and plan to share your skills with others. And as a family, talk about how it felt to share with others. What did you learn about yourself and other people? Would you like to do this or something different to share in the future? If you're older than 6, if your children are older than 6, you can start planning ahead. So in this story, Mina couldn't afford a new coat. She and her mother planned ahead to make a winter coat before it got cold. For this activity, think about an event that will be coming up soon for your child or your family. You'll be starting school in the fall, which is coming up pretty soon, a family vacation still, or planning for a holiday that your family celebrates. First, make a list of what is needed for this event. such as clothes, supplies, or gifts. When you have a list, think about all the different ways you could get what you need or want for this event: new, used, handmade, or borrowed. If you need some new clothes, for example, compare the cost of a new name brand clothing, new clothing at a discount store, and used clothing. What are the differences between the clothing? You might also be able to sell your old clothes or toys at a rummage sale or thrift store and use the money for newer clothes. And talk about how you can save money and reuse or recycle items you don't use anymore. Thank you for joining me this summer with the Money as You Grow bookshelf, which was updated by the University of Nevada Extension's Money on the Bookshelf program by the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau.